Hello and welcome to the Pixel Scandal Nerdcast, episode 27. What? I'm Kurt, and to my right is, that way is Oreztes. How you doing, Oreztes?
Pretty good. I'm just looking at the show. I didn't know what the hell you meant by stinger. I didn't know it was that little animated video thingy. I was very surprised. I was expecting a wasp or something.
Yeah, that's new. Yeah. I wonder how people like it.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It's the background on my phone.
How are you doing, Handor?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. I'm sucking air and pumping blood, so can't complain.
You're what?
And I'm Gigett. Hi, I'm here tonight too. Woohoo!
I'm End of Line. Hello, everybody.
Hey, End of Line.
Hey, Kurt.
Yeah?
Where can people find us on the internet?
Oh, man. If people want to find us on the internet, they can find us in all sorts of places. They can find us if they go to pixelscandal.com. They can find us on Twitter at Pixel Scandal. They can find us on Facebook by searching for Pixel Scandal because we still haven't put our custom username because we don't have Pixel Scandal for some reason, and I have to figure out who has it and buy it from them because it's probably End of Line in like an account he forgot he owns.
Yeah.
They can find us by emailing us, pixelscandal@gmail.com, or they can watch this show, the one that they're watching right now, live at twitch.tv/pixelscandal, or they can watch past recordings on YouTube, or they could get this show as a podcast in audio form from iTunes or Google Play or Spotify. Not Shopify. We do not have a Shopify. Or any podcatcher of choice.
Pod turkey.
It's not a turkey. It's not Thanksgiving. It is not a turkey.
It's November. It's a pod turkey.
Yeah, there's all sorts of places. If we're on MeWe. You can find us on MeWe.
Yep.
Search that shit for Pixel Scandal.
Did we seriously turn into a really bad car advertisement?
Only for the first 3 minutes of the podcast.
Only always.
So 3 easy payments of $19.99.
Hashtag on brand.
I've always been confused why our first segment is like, where do you find us? If they're hearing you, they've already found us.
Well,
no, but maybe they want to
somewhere else.
Look at the really cool website that Kurt built with all the cool links to all the other stuff we do. Maybe they only watch this and they don't know that we have actual plays that they could go watch.
I really only want to be around myself as little as possible, so why would somebody want to see us multiple times?
I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I've seen you guys multiple times today, so I feel like other people might.
This is already officially 2 times too many, and it's the 2nd time today.
Well, hey guys, did you know that we're gonna have a spotlight topic later, and it's gonna be about story game elements in traditional RPG games? So stick around after we bullshit for 20-30 minutes, and we'll talk about an actual focused topic for the night.
So good.
So what were you gonna say, Handor? I just wanted to get that in there.
I feel like it's too far gone now.
Oh, I ruined it. Well, cool.
Yeah, well.
So End of Line. Do we have any announcements?
Glad to see you're so tore up about it.
I am.
We have a shit ton of announcements.
We do. The announcement section has gotten real long.
Yeah. So to start with,
5 things.
Our Sunday game tomorrow.
It used to be 2, so 5 is a lot.
5 is a lot. Our game of the week is going to be Golf with Friends.
Yay!
We did some Golf with Friends. I
Way
think
back
it was
at the
our
beginning.
first Let's Play, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Or Human Fall Flat, I think may have been.
Human Fall Flat was our first one.
But
so we're going to be doing Golf with Friends. We found out that there's a bunch of new custom maps for it. So we're going to go ahead and download some of the custom maps and check them out. Heard it's really cool. Fallout 76 launch review episode is going to be Thursday, November 15th at 7 p.m.
That's this Thursday.
Yeah, the game launches on Wednesday. So we are going to spam it on Wednesday, and then we're going to come to you guys on Thursday. Don't worry, we all played through every beta that was available for PC that we could. And we already have quite a bit of feedback, so it won't be just because of that day. It'll be over the beta course and also what we see in live. We have our first playthrough of We Were Here Too with myself and Handor. That's currently up on our YouTube channel. We'll be posting that every Thursday. So the next episode of that will be uploaded this coming Thursday, which will be episode 2.
Which is really entertaining to watch. I went back and watched some of that first episode. You guys are super entertaining.
It was really frustrating to rewatch myself because I'm like, oh my god, we're so stupid. It's very difficult to watch again after you've played it, but it was a lot of fun.
It's easier when you can see the other person's screen and go, that's
like,
why.
Oh, you idiot! It's right there.
So you guys should go watch that because it's real entertaining.
Our first, I'm super excited about this one. The first Paper Scandal side quest series is going to start December the 1st at 9 a.m. This is going to be what I hope is going to be a long series. We are having guest GMs who are going to run games for us. We haven't announced who, but we have people who are going to GM that created these systems and created these settings. Very exciting. Our first launch will be Tales from the Loop, which if you've seen Stranger Things, is kind of like Stranger Things, sci-fi-ish, 80s. You're a bunch of younger children. And that's going to be run by Dave, CA Dave from Happy Jack's RPG podcast. So that's going to be amazing.
I'm
9
very
a.m.
excited
December
about
1st.
that one. We have this super sick promo that End of Line put together for it. It's so good. Go check our YouTube for that.
I'm hoping it's spooky.
If somebody has better internets than me, you should totally link the promo video in chat right now so people can go watch it.
Well, but don't right now. Go watch it later.
I know, but
you can open in a second window.
Oh, look, my internet worked. I'm gonna post it. There we go.
We had our Dungeon World game today. Actually, that's gonna be posted online really shortly. It was an amazing game. We said goodbye to one of their party members. I'm not gonna spoil it, but you definitely want to check it out. Some cool stuff went down. There were hats, not as many as I would have liked.
We'll definitely talk about that a little bit later, more from a recap.
Somebody may or may not have gotten a permanent hat.
Yeah.
Or a semi-permanent.
Real good.
Let's hope.
Our next Dungeon World game, though, is coming up shortly. It's not going to be as much of a gap as it was our last, because we had some one-shots in between. But this next Dungeon World game is going to be December the 8th, and that'll be at 9 a.m.
Which I know Night Sun's not here to complain about it, but I know he's super excited. It's at 9 a.m. It's like his favorite time of the day.
Yeah, I'm actually super excited to play this one now. I wasn't having a lot of fun with the last character.
Oh, I love your new character.
Yeah, the new character's fun.
Well,
whenever I heard what you were, I literally was, because I was muted. You guys couldn't see me because I was doing production. But I'm literally like, oh my god, that's amazing.
It was so good. Your intro was so good. Like, you crushed that intro. It was very enjoyable.
Well, we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about the Dungeon World game as we get into what we played this week, and we'll definitely call out some spoilers if you haven't watched it yet, so you can skip over that part of the podcast when we get there. But at this point, what is everybody excited about? I see, Kurt, you got something that you've been working on for the Naga Demon thing.
I do. So I am Rob Haybear of who was our guest today. Bufo the Brave in Dungeon World. Shouted out on Facebook and all over the social media sphere that he's in, asking if people were interested in participating in Naga Demon, which is National Game Design Month. And so I'm participating. Christopher Gray jumped in there. Gene, I always forget Gene's last name. Gene Ace jumped in there. I know he's in chat. Sorry, Gene.
Gene Kelly? Is it Gene
It's
Kelly?
not Gene Kelly. It's definitely not Gene Kelly.
Hackman.
Gene Hackman.
And
probably Gene Hackman.
a few other people I'm less familiar with.
See, Dave is part of it, isn't he? Because he's writing something about.
Kadave is in there. He's doing he's working on a hack for Tales from the Loop for like geriatrics, right? Like you want to play aging like for Cocoon and stuff like that.
It's not what we're gonna be playing.
But
so is this like the cool new theme, like with the 10 candles and then the 16 candles? So is the new thing to like turn a system on its head? Because I love it.
Yeah, I love it. There's a game called Kids on Bikes. Someone wrote Dads on Mowers. Like it's
I like it.
The game that I am writing is it's called Lighthearted. It is a pared down. It started as a pared down version of Savage Worlds. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I'll blow out the time. But the The big thing that I'm adding is instead of a wild die, you have emotions as stats that are your like secondary stat. So anytime you go to roll, you roll your attribute, and then you pick what emotion your character is currently feeling, and that's the wild die that you get. And so basically, it's roll 1, keep 2, or roll 2, keep 1, right? You roll 2 dice, keep the highest. Same as Savage Worlds works, but there's a lot of other changes to sort of how the die mechanic resolves. For instance, the 4 to 7 and 8+ results determine who gets narrative control, not just success or failure. So so there's some interesting stuff in there. I'm adding a bunch of condition things in there. I did a playtest of it on Thursday with Rob and Gene and Dave Kadave. Went really well.
It's it's the rules and magic and everything that Kurt's been working on for Nuclear Night School.
Yeah.
Except changed into his own system. So it still has all that social stuff that we've talked about in the past with this system, or hack that Kurt was kind of writing for Savage Worlds. But I really like the direction that Kurt's taking this and kind of writing his own system for it and incorporating emotions that match with the lights and colors and stuff, which is really neat.
Yeah, so this will take over for Savage Worlds in Nuclear Night School. And my goal with Lighthearted is to be able to like do it for different settings. So it would be like Nuclear Night School, a lighthearted RPG, right? Yeah. So that's my goal with that, and I'm having a great time in that Slack chatting about game design, and everybody's got really creative ideas in there, and their projects are really exciting. So it's been a fun
when are we gonna play?
To be part of.
When are we gonna play The Warren, a lighthearted RPG?
Well, The Warren's already kind of a lighthearted RPG.
No, it's not.
Except for content. But yeah, so that's what I'm excited about, is this new project I'm working on, Lighthearted. And I have one more thing that I'm excited about, which won't take very long to talk about, which I'm going to put in front of the camera because I got this amazing dice tray that snaps together.
It looks like
it
a
lays
pillow.
flat and you snap it together. It's from Windmill Designs.
On Etsy.
WYNDMILL Designs. I think that's it. And it's Jason Mills and his wife make these amazing things, and it's got skulls and roses on it, and I love it so much.
I was gonna say, who did you meet and at what con that sold you on those?
No, I bought it on Etsy.
Yeah,
they've got an Etsy shop, so I'll put it in our show notes. I'll put the Etsy shop in our show notes because it's super cool.
Definitely.
Well, Jason Mills is super cool, so.
Yes, Jason Mills is cool. And come on, how amazing is it that his wife named her, I don't know if her actual first name is Wind.
I think it's Windy. I think it's Windy, but
if it is, that would be amazing. But her last name is Mills. So her name is Windmill. That's just the best. I love it so much. It's amazing.
All right.
But cool. So hey, end of line. Do you want to take the next thing? We're very excited to promo for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. I was watching the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, which I think a lot of us tend to do. And they are doing something really incredible. They are doing a 24-hour live stream Friday, 11/16, the 16th of November, starting at 6:30 p.m. for an action charity called Rainbow Railroad, which is an action group that finds sponsorship and helps people with relocating out of areas that are not friendly to GLBTQA QI community. So people in Chechnya and Syria and other places such as that, where they have potential of getting arrested for their sexuality or even worse. They help them find, through the organization, they help them find travel to a safe country, and then they help them do legal asylum and whatnot. So it's a really incredible cause that they're doing to help fund this charity, Rainbow Railroad. So I want to give out a shout out to them. And we will have on this posting, and also in chat, I will give you guys the URL that you can go if you would like to donate on behalf of their initiative.
Yeah, that's happyjacks.org/rainbow.
Yep.
And I think they're using the hashtag Rainbow Railroaded.
Yes. Rainbow Railroaded,
which is kind of exciting. And I might not be here next week.
Oh, is there another con, Kurt?
No, he's gonna go Pearl Harbor, the Happy Jacks crew down there.
Well,
Gonna show up unannounced at
I have
Stu's
not
house and be
said
like,
On there-
I have nothing for sure.
on their podcast this morning that they did, because they actually postponed their regular podcast so that they could make this announcement today when everything was kind of official. They made it very clear that all of the proceeds are going to be going to the Rainbow Railroad, that Happy Jacks is not getting anything that you donate. And Stu, who runs Happy Jacks, made it clear that you don't have to donate just during the 24-hour stream that they're doing next Friday. They're going to keep it live until the 31st of December. So they're going to keep it open through the end of the year. That way, if you need a little more time to have funds together so that you can donate to this really amazing cause, they're going to keep this open for quite a long time, not just the 24 hours. But they are going to do a full 24 hours of RPG gaming during their stream.
It's a really good cause, and it really kind of inspired me when I saw it, and I'm super excited to shout from the rooftops and help them any way we can. So
Yep, absolutely. So cool. So I see here that there is something about Path of Exile.
It's that time again. Super excited. I was actually having withdrawals from playing Path of Exile, so I started playing something else, which we'll get into in the what we played recently.
Yeah.
Path of Exile is a new expansion, the new league, and expansion. So they're actually like Diablo 3. They have leagues every 3 to 4 months, which they do like incredible, like fresh new content. But this is actually going to be a full-on expansion. So there's probably going to be like a few different acts added to the game, probably some significantly game-changing skill gems and support gems and things like that. If you're into ARPGs or you played Path of Exile and you enjoyed it before, now is a good time to get back into it. The game, I think it's December 11th. I apologize, I didn't check. But it should be a very, very good ladder or season or league, depending on which you're talking about.
Nice.
Yeah, very excited.
That
I love it.
That's awesome. I'm trying not to sneeze. Cool.
Yes!
So there's also something on here about Fallout 76. Is there something else going on, or are we just saying we're excited about the launch this coming week?
coming
We're
out
just
this
excited
week.
about it.
Nice.
Yeah. We had a rocky relationship with it during beta, but we did have fun. We actually had
Right.
quite a bit of fun.
Yeah. The game is
so we're looking forward
the
to it.
game is beautiful. So
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, I was not gonna lie, I was pretty close to canceling my pre-order, but then they made that Reddit post and they kind of caved on a couple of things that they weren't gonna cave on, like the increasing the stash limit and adding push to talk. So they were like, "All right, we'll add them," and I was like, "All right, then I won't cancel."
Not yet, anyway.
Because man, I've got to tell you, making a new character, because when you make your new character, you're there on the character creator, but then so is literally everybody else who's making a character with open mics.
yeah.
So-
I heard the N
Oh
word.
man, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hey,
I heard the
Yeah.
N word like 3 times, like
What the
5 minutes
fuck?
after I
Yeah,
walked
dude.
out, dude.
I
Oh
was
my
making a
God.
Pretty
character.
crazy.
One guy was like, "Yo, where's the slider for the dick? How do I get a giant dick?" And I was like, "Dude, I don't even care. Just accept. I'm gonna change my character later. I'm just running out of here right now. I don't want to listen to these people."
God.
Right.
I fortunately had like really cool dudes that were like, oh, I can hit. Why is it? And they're like, oh, I finished creating my character. I can see you over there creating your character. And they're like, let's join up. And as soon as we left, there was like 4 of us. We grouped up and they were all super nice and cool. And we laughed and we're like making fun of the little signs the whole way through. And so
Yeah,
I had a totally different experience than you guys did. I had
The
adults.
internet is the best and worst of humanity.
The
Yeah.
The
I
very little
literally-
bit that Kurt and I got to play of the beta consisted of Kurt taking the time to make his character, which is usually his favorite part of playing a game, is
Took,
sitting
like,
there
40
spending
minutes.
30 minutes like designing his character.
Not even that much.
Logging in, going, oh, we have to be friends to group up, making each other friends, and then immediately getting DC'd. And when we logged back on, it had deleted his character. And so he was like, fuck this. And so he just made whatever the like base whatever default character, named it fuck, like got into the game and then nothing would render right. Like all of the trees and bushes were black when you went outside the
You
vault.
know the little robots that are right outside that attack you?
Yeah.
They were just
Yeah, yeah.
black
They were
blobs
just black
with little
blobs.
red lines that shot out of them.
And it was like that on both of our computers. So that was the
Friggin'
extent of
crazy.
our
That's weird.
playing
You know, when I
Fallout
first-
76 beta.
When I very first logged in, and we went outside, and it was fine on the first stoop. But once we went past the first stoop, everybody jumped over. I just assumed that this is what the world looked like because it kind of hadn't finished yet. But to me, it looked like the entire ground was had a ton of holes in it. So all the guys jump off, and they're like, "Okay, we're gonna collect wood." I'm like, "Where's the wood at?" Because it looked like just a default texture
Oh.
with these warped holes every in exact spaces, and I jump over the stone pillar that you were after you walk out of the vault, and I go whoop, and the guys are like, "Holy shit, where the f- did he go?" And I was just going whoop whoop like
falling through
like
the
I was
world.
in Portal. Yeah, just like.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I logged out, and come to find out there was an issue with my download. I had to re-download like, I don't know, 25 gigs of the game.
Yeah. Which
Sounds
is great
legit.
for you.
Oh yeah, that was wonderful. By the way, I live out in the middle of nowhere, so I get pretty much dial-up. So 25 gigs was a good 3-day. It's like it's a lot like you have the expressway and I get the horse and buggy. Nothing
Yeah.
against the
The
Amish.
Amish.
Amish? Oh, don't worry, they're not watching.
No disrespect to the Amish.
If they're watching this, they're in trouble.
yeah.
Yeah, if
But
they're
seriously-
watching this, then it's not gonna.
Yeah, they don't care
They're
that you're
not
making
on
fun
it.
of them at this point.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
yeah.
Well, we kind of moved into what we played recently already, but let's like officially move into that part. Today we played Dungeon World, so here's your spoiler warning that we're going to talk about the game we played this morning. So if you haven't watched that yet, either skip over this part or go watch that and then come back if you care.
Yeah.
But how did you guys think the game went today?
I mean, I'm
I
interested
thought
to
it-
hear your thoughts because
I honestly think it's one of the best games we've had so far.
It was a pretty
I think
good
so.
Yeah, I liked it. Had fun with it. It was cool.
I
I
feel
liked
think-
it. more
I
than
think my
the,
favorite
other
was the
Dungeon World
party
games.
The party episode was, I think, my favorite.
the last one.
Yeah, I think that one's going to be my favorite. But I did really think this one was really solid.
Yeah. It was a very good game. I felt like there was a lot of really good like character develop moments,
Right.
and getting to meet my Oreztes's new character, who is Raven, who happens to spoilers, is my familiar, which is kind of amazing that you made a character that's so linked to another person's character, not just my character, but like to take that to choose to be so linked to somebody else's character, I think is a very bold and interesting step to take with a character. And then to make such a you've barely said anything in game and I already love your character. Like it's so great. It's so great.
I think that
Yeah.
I think the best line had to have been, you picked up those feathers, and those were a gift, so therefore you're screwed.
You accepted my servitude, so
you
you
accepted the gift. I am your familiar.
yeah, we were
I am your
bonding.
familiar.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was so great. That was such a great way to
Yeah.
be like, because I had said in the past, like earlier in the game, like I see a feather, I pick it up, and I'm like, and I take it, and then you came back with like, you accepted my feather. That's it. Like we're done. Like I'm your familiar. It was just so. It was so amazing. It was so great, and I really liked the story arc of Bufo and kind of the way that resolved itself, and him being the hero that he was, and really be like he was the moral compass for our group, and I think
It really was.
he kind of taught our group a better way. Like we were kind of that morally gray, and now we have kind of I mean, we're still going to be a little gray, but but I think we're definitely leaning more towards the good than the bad now. And
Yeah, I love how organically that happened. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was great.
Mm-hmm. And I really loved the development between Adelaide and Forrest, and like you said, like this tension that's building between those two characters with really no end in sight of how that's gonna resolve, or if it's gonna resolve, and I like how kind of naturally and organically we're letting that story develop. We're not like, okay, let's just push this along to like put a period in what's going on. Like we're letting it kind of organically build.
Yeah, there's no rush. I mean, this thing that character interaction could end up being, a very brotherly, sisterly thing. It could end up being a romantic thing. It could be like, or it could end up being absolutely nothing and they completely drift apart. It's
just
just
that
crazy.
Tension. It's just that tension that's building was so interesting.
Such a cliffhanger with that.
Well, Kurt and I we went for a walk after the show to kind of like talk things out and decompress, kind of how we do after most like RPG games we play. And something I was telling him about is that, like, you're out of character. You have said a lot that Forrest has these feelings and doesn't know how to work with them. But I've been very guarded with saying how Adelaide feels about things, because I don't think Adelaide had figured out if she had reciprocal feelings. And so us having kind of that, like, intimate moment where, I'm helping you clean your gauntlets and we're sitting there and we're talking and it's in a more personal way, not just like, oh man, you got in a fight and I have to take care of you. But there was more tenderness to it. Was, I think, the first time Adelaide kind of admitted that there was something there, And of course we started singing like Beauty and the Beast. Yeah. There's something there that wasn't there before, kind of thing. Yeah. But like that, that's why I said, like, I like that this story is just kind of organically developing, and like you said, we don't know where this is going to end, and so it's kind of nice that we're just letting it take its natural course.
Yeah,
it's fun. Well, cool. Does anybody have any other thoughts on the Dungeon World game? I kind of rambled on there about it.
I was really pleased with the way it went. I mean, I loved having Rob on there. He brought something really special to the game. I really loved watching Handor. I loved watching you sort of get to a point where you were role playing more this session than you had maybe 2 sessions prior. So, and I mean, you're still relatively new to RPGs, and so it's really nice to watch your journey, right? And watch you sort of understand your characters and how you're supposed to process that and how to deal with those emotions in character and how to deal with that character growth. So that's one of my favorite things about this game is watching that happen. And then Raven is so friggin' cool.
Right.
Yeah, I can't get over that.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that is because of Kurt during the character creation conversation we had on Discord, when I was like, okay, well, I'm not a huge fan of Dungeon World. Here's some other playbooks that I want to kind of go through. And at first I was like, can I do Blood Mage? And he was like, no, Gordon will kill you. It's like, damn, all right. Can I do Artificer? Nah, Gordon won't like that either. I was like, okay, whatever. And then he was like, well, how about like, let's look up Familiar. And then he was telling me about like Sabrina and kind of the stuff about that, the new Netflix show.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, that actually sounds pretty interesting. I'll go with that. And then I actually started watching Sabrina to see exactly what the whole Familiar thing works like on that show. And I was like, that's really cool. I like it. So that's a good show. I like that show.
It is a good show.
It's real good.
Did
you hear that they're getting sued by the Satanic Church, though, for using the images of Baphomet and the children? And
oh, that's so funny.
I know. I really hope all that shakes out, because I really want more Sabrina.
Well, cool. How can they sue for using that image when
it's copyrighted?
But why copyright?
It's too close to their actual image, because they have like a specific image, like a statue.
Yeah, but with
the kids there and everything.
But the thing wasn't okay. I don't mean to make this like, forget it.
No, I had the same reaction.
I get what you're saying, but yeah,
I had the same reaction.
Because when you flip the coin, their whole thing was they were upset about.
Yeah.
Like, Christian and so on, and paganism and all that stuff. And
the
they're
other
like,
pro- the
tear
other-
it down. If you don't tear it down, we're putting up ours. So they
Well,
were like,
the other half to their argument though is that the Satanic Church isn't evil, and Sabrina like portrays this kind of the satanic religion as an evil organization with like killing people and all that kind of stuff. So it's also defamation of character, not just
They're
copyright.
not evil in Sabrina. They're like the friendliest devil worshippers ever.
Well, it gets darker.
I was
I don't
gonna
know how
say-
much of that
I
you've
mean,
watched. It gets pretty dark.
to be fair, like, when you watch a film about, what's the film about the
Sounds like-
truce? Huh?
What, about the truce?
No. Spotlight. Yeah, Spotlight. What did you say?
No, I said sounds like.
He was trying to
I was
help
trying
me
to
sounds
get you to
figure out
say
your
what
word.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's Spotlight. I think is the title of the movie, and it was about the discovery of Catholic priests and so on and so forth. And
Oh, that
It's
movie.
like-
Okay.
yeah, it's like
Well, the
There
the
are-
difference too is that the Satanic Church is a modern church, and so they probably just copyrighted their imagery,
Right.
like Mickey Mouse. Like
Yeah.
right.
it's
That's
a brand
unfortunate.
image.
Well, moving right along
Yeah,
here,
that's
'cause
unfortunate.
we want to be able to get to our spotlight topic tonight.
Yeah, let's.
Kurt, what did you play this week?
I played stuff.
You
I don't
played-
have the thing.
You played Bubble Gumshoe this week.
Oh, that was okay. We just finished Dungeon World. I played Bubble Gumshoe on the Gauntlet on Tuesday night. We mostly did character gen and a little bit of an intro story for about an hour. It was pretty interesting. So Bubble Gumshoe is a modification of the Gumshoe system, if you're familiar with that.
No.
Which is a sort of like investigative. That's the Bubble Gumshoe book.
That's the book.
Gumshoe is a investigation game, which focuses on anytime their gimmick is anytime you would find a clue, all you have to do, you don't roll, you just reduce your stat by 1 to find the clue. So it takes away the whole, oh well, they rolled poorly and so they didn't get the information they needed and my mystery is blown. It's something that got talked about a lot, maybe like 4 years ago. There's a lot of stuff that kind of came out around that and how to deal with mysteries in other games. But Bubble Gumshoe is a like pared down version a little bit that deals with teen sleuths. So like Nancy Drew, Veronica Mars, that kind of stuff.
Love Veronica Mars.
Yeah,
Like IRL,
Riverdale.
the TV show.
like the TV show Veronica Mars kind of stuff.
Riverdale.
Yeah, Riverdale. But it's interesting because the person who had requested the game be run was really interested in Detective Conan, which is a manga and anime about like a teenage sleuth who gets shrunk down into like a young kid, and he's like this super detective with gadgets and stuff. And so the touchstones were a little off, right? It was like on one end everyone's like thinking real anime, and I'm over here like Riverdale, like I'm making Jughead, and I'm all like angsty, and the other one's like, yeah, let's do it, you know. So
That's
it was,
where you have to talk about tone.
yeah. Well, we had a tone discussion at the beginning, right?
No,
And we
I
sort of
know,
like,
yeah.
and so I sort of animated up Jughead. Like I played a little more Archie Comics Jughead and a little less Riverdale Jughead, where I was like sort of all over the place, and
Yeah.
I forgot to be hungry, but that's all right.
More
But yeah, so-
burgers.
But something I thought was really interesting about the game is through most of the interactions, it feels really story gamey. But then when you get to a throwdown, which is sort of the fight between, like it's a social combat where you get into an argument, you start rolling damage against their like social hit points. And so it felt really like D&D style game, right? And so it was sort of jarring, and I thought it was actually kind of a good touchstone for our topic later, which is story game tools in traditional RPGs.
Which we will totally come back around to.
So I
very
will
quickly.
actually come back around to Bubble Gumshoe as a reference point.
Yeah.
Because it was kind
I'm
of
hoping-
interesting.
I'm hoping tonight's spotlight topic isn't a real long. Just saying.
So, Oreztes, you played in After Effects and Premiere. Is that the game you played this week?
Yep, that's what I've been playing this week. Got no time
Which
for nothing else.
everyone gets to see the benefits of that, because that's some pretty phenomenal stuff he's been pumping out, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, and End of Line. I mean, I think both of you guys are really producing some really cool promo videos there. So I'm excited.
Producing their asses off.
Yeah.
We're learning.
I'm so thankful for it too, because there's no way I cannot do Premiere. It drives me insane.
Yeah. Kurt had a meltdown.
Premiere
It's
is
okay.
actually not. It's not horrible. Like when you get into After Effects and start playing with like timelines and effects and transition, all that stuff. You've got like your little column over on the side with like all of your elements and all the effects attached to each one, and then you're like, wow, there's like 50 things here, and then you throw it in a Premiere. It's like, oh, there's only 2 things here. This is fine.
That's so fantastic for a group like us who's just starting out. And I'm sure a lot of you can understand this. We are figuring a lot of this out, as we go, and
We'll do it live.
yeah, and there's a lot of element of that to it, and I'm pretty excited to see Oreztes and End of Line pick up the mantle, if you will, doing a lot of like heavy duty producing for the videos that we want to do and the content that we want to create, and people are stepping up to the table, and it's really exciting to see that happen. And it's
we've definitely hit an evolution phase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really really exciting. It really does put a smile on my face, truthfully, and makes me feel good, makes my heart warm.
Awesome. So Endo,
I just want to say,
what?
I was gonna say, I just want to say one thing about Kurt's bubble gumshoe thing.
Yes.
I don't know anything about the anime that he's mentioned, but when you said Detective Conan, I went in a completely different direction.
I instantly thought it was like a joke thing about Conan the Barbarian, running around solving murders. Like I was like, oh yeah, this sounds like a game I could be into.
This is gonna be weird,
great.
But okay.
Yeah,
But yeah.
Cool. So End of Line, you played Path of Diablo.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean?
Yeah,
because every game that's out is a hack of another game.
Pretty much.
That's
That's
true.
what it sounds like.
It's
Honestly,
season.
so before I read the story about the Happy Jacks thing with the Rainbow Railroad, I thought for sure that was a Mario Kart hack of Ticket to Ride.
Oh my God, someone's gonna do that now.
That's awesome.
100%.
That is pretty good.
No, so I kind of wanted to play Path of Exile, but there's no reason to really play with the season around the corner. So the Immortals thing kind of bummed me out. I didn't feel like playing Diablo 3 because it's absolute fucking garbage now. So I was like, hey, I know that there's a Path of Exile mod for Diablo 2. So I was like, heck, let's go check it out. And so basically it's just a lot of the quality of life stuff from Path of Exile put in the Diablo 2 engine. And it's pretty incredible, actually. It's a lot of fun. I was having a good time with it.
Nice. That's awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So Handor, what do you
yeah, so there's a couple games I played. I only got to play for like an hour and a half or so before we ended up having to do the stream. It took a while. Another one of our what do you call it? Shadow Pixel Scandal members. He's a hardcore programmer, genius, and he decided, like, when he got home from work yesterday, to just write the entire code scripting for the server for the new expansion for Ark. So he did that until 2 a.m. last night, and then had the server going today.
Nice.
So we played some Ark. It's really weird. It's not the Ark I'm used to. There's mechanical dinosaurs, and there's gigantic dung beetles that you feed dung, and they make I don't know. Okay, so, and then I also had a friend of mine kind of basically bullied me into playing a pretty cool, speaking of investigative type games, play Her Story, which is, well, all you're given is an old computer, and it looks like just a computer from 1986, and you have a database, but in order to access the videos on this database, all it is videos. In order to access the videos on this database, you have to have certain keywords, and you only get 5 at a time. So if I type in murder, I'm going to get 17 videos, but only have access to watching 5 of them. So I have to somehow query that more specifically in a way that, that's what I said.
I heard him.
Yeah, see, it's really tricky, and I ended up playing it, I think, until 4:30 in the morning the other day.
Nice.
Because I really wanted to figure out what the fuck was going on. And it's fantastic. Still don't know what's going on, but I'm not gonna spoil anything. But for the price, no, it's super cool. It is super cool. Very interesting.
Nice. That's awesome.
And I probably didn't do it any justice explaining.
It sounds fun though, and I mean, you've convinced me that I need to go buy it. So you did a good job.
Definitely check it out. It's pretty sweet.
Or maybe I'll have End of Line buy it, and then he can share it with me on Steam.
No, I can share it with you, can't I?
Oh yeah, you can share it.
Probably.
It's hard to promote games like that where any information about the game is a spoiler.
Right? Yeah, it's hard to do that with those kinds of games.
Well,
cool.
Neat.
Let's move into our spotlight topic. We did start a little bit late tonight, so we'll probably go a little over the 9:00 hour, so we still hit our hour-ish long podcast here, or a Nerdcast here. But let's move into our spotlight topic of story game tools in traditional RPG games. So there's a lot of different terms. I saw Kurt use the word trad quite a bit. He would say story game tools in trad RPGs, which was super confusing. So what exactly does that mean? What is trad and what is story? What are the definitions of
all right, and that wraps up tonight's Nerdcast.
Thanks guys so much. Yeah.
All right, so let me define some terms here. So these are my definitions. Your definition may vary, and I encourage you to email us if you think I'm wrong. But for the purpose of this discussion, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. So, trad is just a shortening of traditional. So it's just referring to traditional games. So like D&D, Pathfinder, Traveler, Shadowrun, any game or Cyberpunk 2020, any game that was sort of either written a long time ago or sort of holds on to a lot of the same mechanics as older games. Would be referred to as a traditional game, at least by story gamers. Okay. Story games are games that sort of tend to focus on telling an interesting story more than the mechanics of the game. Where a traditional game may focus on how you do an action or the ability to do an action. A story game is going to focus on why, what it looks like, and what the effect is on the characters, like emotionally or the story as a whole. And so there's sort of this split between games, and these are arbitrary barriers. People like to put things in categories because that's how people work.
Yep.
But so obviously there's going to be games that are mostly traditional with some story game elements. There's going to be games that are mostly story game with some traditional elements. There's going to be games that sort of skirt these lines all over the place. But for the most part, if you say story game, you know that you're probably not going to be able to win. There's not going to be a time when winning is an issue. And in fact, your character failing is probably more interesting than your character succeeding, because you're interested in telling a cool story with a bunch of people and not so much in completing objectives, right? In a traditional D&D game, you're going to be really focused on like completing objectives, defeating monsters, how I do things, like what mechanically I'm able to do. So I'm curious, do you guys have any questions before we move on? What are some examples of traditional story games that you know of?
The first thing that I know that I can think of is I would say, I'm assuming that in a traditional game, it's more likely that you run into the guys that have the character that they keep in the folder that they've created, and it's like they never want to lose this character, right? Is that one of those? Is that Like
I
think that's more-
That is a side effect of how complicated some traditional games can be.
Right, and I think the example for you would be that last month when we played Westfall Follies, that was run in Savage Worlds, which is closer on the line of a traditional game than a story game. So you guys had objectives. You were like trying to do a specific mystery, trying to find the little boy that went missing. There was like a combat where you would roll and see if you succeeded, and then when you succeeded, you did damage, and then the other person would try to hit you, and you went back and forth until one of you killed each other, right? So that kind of falls into that traditional RPG game, where today with Dungeon World was more like a story game, where the story we were telling was a little more important than how we hit those points in the story, right?
Yeah, because literally almost anything, there's a million other ways that today could have played out, and
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so I think traditional games end up being a lot more GM run rather than player agency ran. Like the player,
okay, that makes
the
sense.
GM creates a story and you guys kind of play in the story, and how it turns out is based on your actions, but like it's a predetermined story. And story games tend to be more collaborative between the players and the GM or storyteller, right?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely one of the spectrums of like story game to traditional game.
That's how I kind of think about it.
And that's not all traditional games are run that way. Some traditional games, the players are given more agency, or the story's created more collaboratively.
And that comes into where our spotlight topic, which is story game elements in traditional games, right?
But to answer your question about the players with the binders full of characters and whatnot, not necessarily, because for a lot of traditional games that are super rules heavy and complicated, there are online tools and computer software that you could use to build your characters, and you probably would use those if you were really into it.
Yep.
So you would maybe print out a character, go play a game, and then toss it at the end because you're going to update the software or your spreadsheet instead of your character sheet.
That's an
At
interesting.
least that's what I used to do.
That's a really interesting point. Like, I now that I think about it, I think story games, you're more likely to just have your sheet with a pencil and you just change things on the sheet, and you don't need like the character builder on your computer, where the more traditional games have moved to you need a character builder or be have a master's degree in mathematics.
Very well tuned.
Yeah, well, because when I used to play
Yeah.
3.5, we used to play 3.5 a lot. We had Hero Forge, which was a spreadsheet workbook before Hero Forge, the name, got sold to that 3D printing minis company online. There was a workbook called Hero Forge, and it had everything D&D 3.5 in it. And so you would make your character, and you would print out your character sheet. You would go play your game. You would maybe write down what you got that session or that game if you leveled or something, because manually updating your character sheet at any kind of decent level in D&D 3.5 was a process. It took a while. It's much easier just to load up your character in a spreadsheet, say, click the little drop down arrow. Okay, I'm level 14 now. It's like, all right, what feat do you want? I want this one. Okay, cool, you're done. Everything's done for you. As opposed to going through like literally, I think like 80 or 90 books to pick like what feat you wanted and all that crap. It was
Yeah, so traditional games definitely have a lot more math involved.
Some traditional games, I know that there's the OSR community, right, which is the old school Renaissance, which plays a lot of like first ed D&D.
OSR stands for
basic
one
or
roll.
advanced.
What OSR stands for?
I just said it, old school Renaissance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't hear it. Sorry.
So they play a lot of like Redbox D&D or hacks of Redbox D&D, which are like or what is it, Moldvay D&D, which is I think the Redbox, and things like the Black Hack and other old school hacks of D&D or those types of games, which are not necessarily as complex and don't require character builders, but still maintain a lot of the your role determines whether or not you hit, right? Not the outcome of the scene, or your role or your actions. You are only allowed to describe up to the point of when I say you need a roll, and then we see what happens, and then the GM tells you what it looks like, right? A lot of it can also be that goal oriented, or we're here to kill a dragon, right? And take its stuff. like those kinds
Who
of
isn't?
things. Whereas a story game might be the primary function of a story game might be, I want to know if my character can deal with the death of their mother and be okay with this new triangular relationship that I'm in. Like that might be the goal of a story game, is to find out if your character can do that, and then you tell that story over the course of 2 to 3 hours. Some story games are like Fall of Magic is a really good example of a story game where you have very minimal mechanics. Most things are subjective on the sheet, if anything. It'll say like you are Merkherger, a game I played with Tomer, is a good example of this. It'll say like you are a bear of Candice. There is nothing that says what that is or what that does for you. It's all up to you. But the game tells you you are a bear of Candice. You get to tell me what that means, right? And it might mean that you're like a big strong dude from Candice. It might mean that you're a bear.
A literal bear.
A literal bear.
Yeah.
It might mean that you are the person that carries Candice. Like you're a bear of Candice. Like so
I pronounce it candies.
yeah,
I'm
you're a bear of candies.
who has candies.
So there's
I am a gummy bear.
yeah, and so in most traditional games things are more codified. The rules are more stringent. In story games things tend to be a lot more fluid or subjective or just up to the player to decide. Any other thoughts before we kind of move on to the like what kind of elements would benefit each other? Okay. So the next thing I have here is what parts work well together. And the reason I started thinking about this is because I went to Big Bad Con and I played a bunch of story games, and I played 16 Candles, which is a hack of 10 candles. 10 Candles is a game in which you start with 10 dice and 10 candles on the table, or you start with no dice and 10 lit candles on the table. Or no, 10 dice and 10 lit candles. And every time a candle goes out, you lose a die, right? And all the dice do in that game is determine who gets narrative control over the scene.
Yeah, we've
like
talked
who gets
a lot
to say
about
what happens after you roll.
10 candles on this podcast.
They also determine success and failure to a degree, but the more important thing is who gets to say what happens, which is a very story game thing to do, right? Like instead of determining whether you hit or missed or how much damage you dealt, you just say, well, you tell me or I tell you. Like that's all we need to know. And so we played the flip version of that, which is you start with one lit candle and one die, and things are terrible because it's a John Hughes movie, and over the course of the game you slowly get what you want, right? And you get more dice. And the thing that I realized while playing that game is the dice, the game itself was almost just there as permission to play pretend. Right? Like the mechanics weren't really doing anything exceptional for us. The theme, it was thematically interesting. But other than the fact that it gave us some randomness, so we didn't feel like we were just talking to each other, and the construct of game made us feel like it was okay to play pretend.
It's a
right?
bunch of grown-ups playing pretend, but you give it rules, so then it feels like it's got some structure to it, so we're allowed to do it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So how do you end 16 candles then?
When you light
Because
the last candle, the
Okay.
game ends.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, when
okay.
we played it at Strategicon, it was basically like when we lit the last candle, we were like, okay, so you guys have made it to prom. Everybody does one last montage of what their prom night looked like. And so we went around the table and everybody described kind of their epilogue at prom.
Yeah.
And then the game ended.
So the way that they changed it was because 16 dice is just too many dice and too many candles. So you play the up to 10 candles, and when you light the 10th candle, everyone goes around and does their epilogue and lights a candle. So the 16th candle is lit by the end, which that was kind of interesting. That was nice. But
I think Dread is a game like that where you're really just kind of playing pretend, and the mechanic of pulling Jenga blocks is just like giving the players a task they have to complete to feel like they're using rules, but really we're just playing horror fantasy.
Yeah, well, but
or we're just playing a horror game, right?
Dread does something like 10 Candles does something very specific, which is counts down and it builds
Tension.
it builds tension slowly over the course of
Which I think
2 to
Dread
3
does
hours.
that too, right? I mean,
Dread is also a tension builder. Yeah, go
Well,
ahead, sorry.
I don't know that it. Well, yeah, it does.
it's the tension of is the tower
The
gonna
Jenga
fall?
getting lower and lower. Yeah.
Right.
It's stressful, right? You walk up to that tower and you're stressed out, which like increases your heart rate, which makes you feel like, oh, I'm worried about my character.
And then your hands like this, and you're like, I have to pull blocks.
Yeah.
I want to play that game that Night Sun, or not Night Sun, End of Line had you guys play a while back. That you guys...
Yeah, that would be super.
It was really fun. And so I came back from Big Bad Con, and I was scheduled to run Savage Worlds Nuclear Night School at Gauntlet Con, and I was like, man, I had a really good time just sort of playing pretend. I wonder how much story game bullshit I could get away with jamming into my Savage Worlds game. Like, how much narrative control could I give to the players before it felt like we weren't playing Savage Worlds anymore? And how much sort of like epilogue type, or how much like narration can I just pass out, right? Or how much can I use the dice to control narrative control versus the success and failure of a roll without it not feeling like Savage Worlds anymore? And the answer is go write your own game, which I'm doing right now, which is lighthearted. But
well, what I think is interesting about you like coming to this epiphany is this is an old argument that you and I used to have when we first started playing D&D, and I was looking more for that story game, but I didn't know that other games existed, what story games were, or how to ask for that kind of game, because we would get into these arguments where I would say things like, well, but why can't my character just do the things they're good at? Why do I always have to make a roll? Like, if I say, like, you know, I'm supposed to be really attractive and I'm supposed to be really good at talking to people, why can't I just talk to people until we get right to that point where, like, I've tried something that's a little too complicated, right? And then now you ask for a roll, not just every time I try to talk to somebody, I have to make a roll because I'm talking and the game says there's rules for that, right? And so, like, and then you would come back in with, like, no, but that's how the game works, and you have to have the games with the rules and the, you know, and so I think it's funny that, like, 10 years later, we've come to the point where you're like, no, I want that story game bullshit in my traditional game. But, like, you know, that was, like, an old argument, but I didn't know how to ask for that type of game so early on.
And that's the thing, you can do that. You could put story game stuff into traditional games.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's a one-way street. Like, you could add all the story stuff you want to a traditional game. It's really hard to add traditional game bullshit to a story game.
Yeah.
Because traditional games, you think of like rules for all sorts of stuff. And in a story game, it's like, I want to do a thing. And it's like, well, hold on, let me consult a chart. And it's really hard to add traditional, you know, mechanics to a story game, but story game, you just find something that works and throw it in. Like, if you wanted to do the you know, the fate system, the declarations, you could throw that into D&D like super easy.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's all there is to it. You just, okay, that's a thing that's happening now.
I think it's an unfortunate reality that systems can get in the way of the storytelling, because it does break the immersion, and it can fuck up pacing really bad. Like, you're getting in the scene. Okay, go ahead and roll your save for this. Oh, where's my save? Which one is that? Okay, it's this one. Oh no, that's my other page. It's like you're taken out of this thing, and you're in your head. Like, if let's be honest, if you're really, really into a game and you're really enjoying the game, you're totally in your fucking head, like, for most of it. Yeah. Which is, like, the best part. Like, when you're really in the zone and you're hyper focused and you're, like, really in tune with what's going on in your own character. Like, you're totally in your head. I'm in my head, I'm out of my head. I'm in my head, I'm out of my head. It's really jarring. Mm-hmm. In a perfect world, there'd be a way to marry the two where they were both really well balanced. But I tend to like, if it's a system game, I tend to like my system games to be less story, a lot more combat, a lot more strategy. And then I like my story games to be a little lighter on the combat and a little just more emphasized on the story, progressing that character development, interesting things happen. I think most people like both. I think I find myself liking it to be more on the spectrum and not in the middle, on the outside than the middle.
So you're not having to juggle like, oh, this is a meta decision, this is a narrative decision, this is a meta decision, this is a character decision.
Like I would love to have a system where it's like you put story game stuff in like Pathfinder or 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, where if you say roll initiative, it's traditional game time. If you're not in combat, it's story game time.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is the opposite of what End of Line is saying, because you're saying like it either needs to be one or the other, right? Because that to me, when you put the traditional combat system in with a story game, that's where you're walking the line of that sandwich of having the kiss, right? That line is the combat line, right? If you're in combat, it's trad, and if you're out, it's story. Which that's kind of where I sit too, because sometimes I like miniature combat where you're sitting there and you have the minis on the board and you can see everything that's happening. But I really love the character development stuff, and I really like getting into who the characters are as like a person, rather than just like, oh, well, I have a backstory and some stats on a piece of paper. Like I like developing a personality and goals and when they fail, having them actually feel the pain of their failures or, whatever. Like I actually really enjoy the character arc part of games. Which is why I like What's in the Box so much.
Well, there's nothing more fun than being invested in a story and being invested in a character, and then all of a sudden being taken out of that so the GM and a player can fight over grapple rules in 3.5 for now.
Yes.
That's why I memorized them when I played a monk.
Yeah, absolutely, though.
It's just 4
but
paragraphs.
I completely agree with End of Line that, when you go back and forth with a traditional game where you're trying to have this really interesting either character development, or maybe it's a social combat type situation where you're talking to an NPC and you're arguing over the being a social justice warrior for the slaves that they're keeping or whatever, and you're having this kind of back and forth RP session, and then you're asked for a roll and you're like, we could have just talked this out and figured out what the resolution was. Like that dice roll pulled me out of the narrative. Well, so I get that too, the kind of that line.
Yeah. See, I don't mind having the dice roll there, but I want it to be here's the thing. If
quick and easy.
I want it to be a simple resolution mechanic that's easy to understand. I don't want you to have to think about modifiers or anything like that. I want you to quickly pick up the dice, find out what the resolution was, and determine, okay, well, in a story game, I want to know, okay, well, who gets to say how this fight ends, right? Like, does it go my way? Does it go your way? Do I want to hurt this other person? Can I do that? Right? Like, but I don't want it to be something that happened in Bubble Gumshoe was we're doing our investigation, and it's all very simple and like, we're not sure if this would work or not. Roll a d6 and see what happens really quick, right? And we'll move on. And like that was going on, and then we get into this argument with a student. And it's like, oh, this is a throwdown, and suddenly there's hit points, and you're dealing damage, and it didn't fit, right? Like it just didn't make sense.
It becomes literal social combat.
Yeah, it was basically just like, oh, it's attrition, like it's just an attrition system, right? Like I here's my attack, which is my argument, and here's my damage, which is how good my argument was, and here's how much hit points they have left, and I guess we have to keep arguing. And so like that was really jarring in that game because it was running like a story game, and then out of nowhere here's this attrition system. But I think the same thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it feels like, because I mean you play a lot more systems than I do, but you tend to tell us about them, and it feels like most of the independent game developers are really making a conscious decision to get away from the overcomplicated systems that do that. Like I feel like most of the developers seem to be, you'll have to speak to this better than me, but it seems like they've acknowledged that is an issue, and they're really trying to kind of like shift the meta of tabletop gaming to kind of get away from that, because it is weird.
But on the flip side, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to take it in a different direction.
Oh, okay. So I was just going to say on the flip side of that is I was playing a Shadowrun game, and I know a lot of people play Powered by the Apocalypse for the first time, and they think, oh my god, variable success is the coolest thing ever. It's like something bad happens to you, you get a success at a cost, or you succeed, right? And that, like, porting that into trad games is very disconcerting for me. If the game already tells me how my giant dice pool, and if I'm playing Shadowrun, it's because I want to fight and kill stuff, right? Like I want to go in there, I want to fireball that room, and I want salsa.
But you had variable success in Shadowrun because you would almost kill yourself every time you would powerball a room full of bad guys.
Right.
Well,
but it was already covered by the way that Shadowrun functions. And so if you go in there and you're like, okay, well, just roll your dice. If you get 5 successes, it's a success with a cost. If you get less than 2, it's a failure. And if you do that to me in Shadowrun, I'm like, well, I'm playing Shadowrun for these rules. I kind of want to play this board game right now.
So a part of that is the psychology behind feeling like you've succeeded at something. Because if you think about it in a traditional game with most GMs, not all GMs, but most GMs, with the target difficulty of whatever, unless it's the AC armor class of something and that's like a defined number, right? Mm-hmm. Anything else is kind of the difficulty is made up by the GM, and then narratively what happens based on your role is kind of up to them, right? So they've set the difficulty at something, and then if you get close to it, they might okay, you didn't quite get what you needed, but here's a little bit, or shit, no, you totally failed. The psychology of PBTA is that what your role means. You as the player know if this is a fail, if this is a success with a cost, or if it's a success or whatever the fuck it's called. What is the middle one called?
Success at a cost.
Okay.
Success with complications.
I always call it a failure with a kick in the ass, but whatever. But that to me is the psychology behind knowing what your role means and not knowing what your role means. Because if you're playing a game where the GM is setting the difficulty, and in Savage Worlds, if there's something really hard to see, if I ask you for a notice roll and I want there to be something in the room that's kind of hard to see and something that's kind of easy to see, I will have written down on my sheet, okay, if they get a raise, they're going to get this information. If they get a success, they're going to get this information. And then if they fail, this is what they're going to see, right? And so that's the kind of GM I am. I'm not telling you as a player, okay, if you get an 8, you're going to get more information. If you get 4, you're going to succeed with a cost, or, you know what I mean?
You're going to succeed, but there's going to be something you missed.
Right. The difference with those dice rolls, with PBTA, and the way I feel like traditional games have been run is that traditional games, you don't know what that line is, right? You just make your roll and then look at the GM and go, I rolled a 14 on my perception check. What does that mean, right? You don't know what the DC is of that. The difficulty of that roll should have been. Where in PBTA, you absolutely know these numbers mean these things. And I think that's why people like you and other players who are like, oh, this is amazing, and people like me that are like, this is stupid. I don't want to know how much I failed by, or how close I got to succeeding, or that there's something I missed. I just want to be able to...
How would your character know that?
Well, that's what I mean, though. That to me is metagaming, because if I rolled that, whatever is it, 7 to 9, the failure with a kick in the ass, I know there's something I'm missing, or I know that I could have done better, right? But if I'm rolling a perception and I roll a 14, I don't know that I missed something. I can't metagame the fact that was wrong.
So as an example of psychology and the way I think about games changing between a traditional game and a story game, when I play PBTA, I kind of want my character to get their ass kicked. I want to see them go big and then go home when they get when they fail, because the failures are interesting, right? That's when the GM gets to do cool shit to me. Because in PBTA, you know that the GM doesn't get to do anything to you if you get a 10 plus. That's the most boring result to me. It's oh, well, I want to do this. Okay. That's boring to me. I want them to add complications and interesting stuff to the game. and that's how I view 6 minus and 7 to 9. It's like 6 minus. Oh, you're gonna do all kinds of cool shit right now.
That's 'cause you're
Tell
the
me all the
GM.
fun stuff, right? No, I've played more PBTA than I've
That's
run
why
it.
that's why the trick with PBTA is to always come up with an action that's going to be cool regardless of the outcome.
Oh yeah,
If I get a 10 plus, this is going to be awesome. If I don't, something awesome is going to happen as a result of it
10
anyways.
plus, fleshy hands.
right. Like
Less than that,
Yeah.
bad thing.
which is why I tend to go big in those kinds of games, because I know that my failure is going to be exciting, right? It's not just going to be like, oh great, now there's guards and I still haven't figured out what's going on in this town. Like,
So going back to the like traditional game elements and this like wanting to keep things simple so that you can continue with the story games, I was actually going to say that is something that I like about PBTA is you make a roll and that's it. There's no math. There's no there's nothing. You just make the roll and you know if you succeeded or fail very quickly. The part that took me out of the easiness of it is those goddamn like put me in a box questions that's like, we were telling a story, I made the roll to see if I succeeded on this thing or not, we determined that I succeeded, let's move on with the story. And having to fit my questions into those question box takes me out of that like smooth narrative that like End of Line and I are like, we just would like to be like a seamless game where really quickly we roll, we go cool, succeeded, or cool, got kicked in the ass, whatever, and like keep going with the story. And those questions kind of get in the way of that, I feel like, for me, just as much as math would have.
For like discern realities, if
Right.
you're like asking the GM, you're specifically investigating, looking for a specific answer, and it's like, all right, I made my roll, I get to ask 3 questions. None of these questions apply to the information that I'm trying to get.
And to me,
So
that feels like
I don't even want to ask them.
And to me, that feels like the same thing as having to do like I have a +2 on this or a -1 or having to do the math for the roll.
yeah.
Like having to fit my questions into those predetermined questions pulls me out of the narrative just as much as like the math would have.
Right. You're like, I'm a goddamn bear of Candice. I tell you what happened.
Right. Exactly. I am a gummy bear, goddammit.
Yeah, I am a gummy bear, and you just carry me in your pocket. I get melty, and I'm awesome. But so I think I think what Oreztes was saying was as long as you don't encroach on what the game does well, you can incorporate other things, right? Like you could ditch the whole social mechanics section of a D&D game and drop in a roll the d20. A 10 or less is a 6 minus result. 10 to 15 is a 7 to 9 result, and a 15 plus is a 10 plus result. You're in an argument. Roll your d20. Tell me what happens. Right. Like you could totally do that in D&D, and it wouldn't really change the game all that much because D&D doesn't give a shit about your social encounter.
Yeah.
It wants to know if you killed the kobold and got the loot.
Yeah.
That's one of those scenarios where like there's very fringe examples of players who would make like a diplomancer where you wouldn't want to do that. But I mean, for the most part, for games like D&D, and I believe Pathfinder is pretty similar, most of the feats, most of your character builds are focused on combat. So in a situation like that, if you're playing a scenario like that where everybody is building a character for combat, who cares what the social stuff is about? You make it whatever you want. You find some cool rules from any other story game you want, and that's what we're doing now.
And I think that's my problem with the traditional game is that it doesn't give you tools to build that story, and so you as a group have to really find and build the story for yourself, kind of like when we were getting really bored of the 5th ed campaign that we were playing way back when, where we kept going in the same tunnel to kill the same things because we could never get through the whole goddamn adventure in the 4 hours, and so like it became Groundhog Day in the stupid tunnels, and then by like 6 sessions later we still hadn't finished this goddamn tunnel, and we're like, why are we even here? We don't even know why we're here anymore. Like that to me is really frustrating because where's the story? Like, why am I here? Why do I care? And I feel like traditional games should still have those elements that make you care about your characters and still be building a story even though the tools aren't there. And I think I love the idea of putting in story game bullshit rules to help you create a narrative in a traditional game.
But you
Right.
seem to be implying that character development does not happen in combat. And I would like to point out that
Not true.
today in our Dungeon World game, a decidedly non-traditional game, Forrest did a ton of character development in combat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I think that's where we start looking at, like Kurt was saying about using traditional game stuff in story games, like what parts work. And I think that's where it works is when a fight happens in a story game, that there is a little bit of a mechanic involved that lets you still have a combat successfully.
Right. Is there enough to make it feel like a fun and interesting fight and not just you roll one die and tell me who wins the fight?
Right. I think the part of a story game successfully doing combat and like having those traditional game elements, a lot of that relies on the players and the GM to, like Kurt did today, where there wasn't like an initiative or anything, but you guys very much described out like the stance of the two fighters and why you were kind of goading each other into fighting and the different moves you took on each other. And then it was like when you actually like went to attack each other, then you made the roll. But I think when you're trying to put the combat part into a story game, you still have to continue with the story game where you're describing the fight. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be a roll that resolves whether or not things were successful. But like it was so entertaining listening to Handor and Kurt describe the way the characters were kind of dancing around each other and like, exactly the way you punched him in the knee and just everything that happened. And the dice roll told us whether or not it succeeded, but like the description is what made that fight interesting. And I think that's where you can pull in those traditional elements with the dice rolls, but also you have to maintain that level of storytelling. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion anyway.
Well, and I think some people would argue that Dungeon World does include several traditional game elements, right? Like it has HP, it has the traditional 6 stats from D&D. It has like the types of things that it includes from D&D are very traditional. Mm-hmm. And it generates a more traditional feel than your average Powered by the Apocalypse game. But I think it does it well, right? Like if you want to have the feeling of a traditional game without having all the crazy mechanics, Dungeon World handles that. Well, I think.
For me, what defines traditional and story games is not so much the mechanics or the difference between combat and story and whatnot. For me, what decides a lot of what makes a game traditional are options, like character creation options for me, because I love character creation. I like having a ton of options. I like having 50 books to go through, and I like needing a spreadsheet or a program or something, and I like sitting and taking 4 hours to build a character, and on paper it's like this guy's really amazing at this thing. Yeah. On story games, there isn't that. So it's like with Powered by the Apocalypse or Dungeon World. It's like here's a character sheet called a playbook. On the character sheet, it's step by step. You pick one thing from this section. You pick one thing from this section. You apply your stats here. You pick one thing from here. You're done. There's no complexity. There's no research. There's no nothing. So for me, that is what determines a traditional game and a story game for me. It's not so much the systems within the game, like how the game plays out when you're actually in the game. Mm-hmm. For me, that all starts, at character creation before you even sit down at the table.
So you're interested in the complexity divide, like how complex and how many options do I have to differentiate myself from others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't.
Yeah, I like uniqueness.
I think the main thing that you don't like about Dungeon World is that like you are the fighter or you are the wizard, because like yes, you are unique, but you can't make that character unique, right? Like it is predefined who that character is. You just give it attitude.
I like Dungeon World now. I didn't like it before today. Now I like it because we
absolutely
went
agree.
through all the different playbooks. Because the ones in the Dungeon World playbook, I'm just like, I've seen these before. There's a fighter, there's a rogue, there's a cleric, there's a wizard. I know
Mhm.
what these guys are. I know what these guys do. I've done this already 100
Mhm.
times, and I've done it better than what they're giving me in Dungeon World. So I'm not really interested in this. This is just like in the game itself, you are the best fighter in the world. But on paper, this fighter is not anywhere near as good as this fighter I was playing in this other game. That
Right.
one was way more fun than this guy is. So to me, it was just like kind of boring. But once you open up like the website that Kurt gave me, where it was just like a list of playbooks, and
The
it's
big
like,
list of Dungeon World
yeah,
playbooks.
and
Yeah.
it's like, here, find something on here you haven't done before. Go for it. Like there's all kinds of interesting stuff on there. Just find something that you haven't done that is interesting. And it's like, cool, I like this now. This is fun.
I've definitely got to say I agree with you for different reasons, but Dungeon World has grown on me. I did not like it the first probably 4 games or so that we played of it, but it has definitely started to grow on me, and I don't think it's necessarily the system. I think it's the character growth that we've seen, that I like playing this character and I like playing with the other characters. And it almost doesn't matter what the system is at this point. And I think that's where I've gotten to with Dungeon World. I don't know if it's necessarily Dungeon World or that I'm just enjoying the story, which I say this all the time to Kurt. I can put up with almost any system I don't like as long as I like the character I'm playing and the story that's being told.
What? I'm sorry.
No, please, Handor.
What's the uh tabletop Geek and Sundry, the one that would Will
Critical
Wheaton
Role.
GM?
Tabletop? It's called Tabletop.
No,
Will Wheaton's
Crit-
show is called Tabletop.
Critical Role.
Or are
Yeah.
you talking about... Go ahead.
the actual story he created in the game that he.
Yeah,
what's that
it's
based on?
it's called... It starts
It
with
was a
A.
futuristic.
Yeah.
That.
And they created they had like a designer
Titan's
create
Grave.
like Titan's Grave. What is that based on? Because that seems really cool.
I think it uses 13th Age.
So what would that be? Story?
No, that's a pretty traditional game, but it does have some interesting story game elements where the dice don't just determine your action, but also give you these like stunts that you can do. So like if you roll, I think you have a
I remember that.
stunt die, and the number on the stunt die determines what kind of stunt you can do, and
the stunt meant they got to do something. They got to explain the story and the extravagance of how it succeeded or whatever.
Yeah. They get to add interesting bits or do extra stuff based on what that stunt die rolled.
So they've added crunch to a social game.
Well, no, Titan's Grave is 13th Age, which I think is a little more traditional. It's a fairly crunchy game. Like I think character generation is a little more crunchy than...
Yeah, but
it's not as crunchy as like 3.5, but...
Yeah, generally you don't see a lot of crunch applied to like the social aspects of a game.
Yeah,
except the Bubble Gumshoe.
But except for Bubble Gumshoe, which basically the throwdown is their big fight scene, right? Like that is their big mechanic. That's where the mechanics are, is in the fight scene. So, I think my final question is where's the line? Like or maybe we reached it. Like maybe we answered that question, right? Like anytime, if you're going to interfere with the mechanics that I liked about this game and the reason I sat down to play it, then I probably don't want that to happen, right? And
or at least give the option to rebuild the character focused on the mechanics that you've changed.
Right. So I guess final thoughts from me are, if you want to add new elements to a game, to any game, have a discussion with the players before you start making changes to your game, and talk about what you want to change and why, and find out if the players are interested in those kinds of changes,
right,
and whether or not they'd be open to that kind of game, or what the game is going to become.
I feel like if your players are signing up for a traditional minis combat, hack and slash, don't talk to my XP points kind of game, they're going to be really disappointed if your GM sits down and is like, okay, we're going to do that, but also here's all this story game bullshit I want to add in there, right?
Mhm.
And vice versa. Like if you were sitting down to a very story game and they're like, yeah, cool, but when we do combat, I really want it to be crunchy and we're going to use this system for combat.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like it's important to talk about like what kind of game exactly are you walking into and what are you as a group hoping for.
So I'd say don't make it a surprise, because
Yeah.
I definitely I've had it be a surprise and it was not pleasant, and I've seen players sit down at my Savage Worlds game and then find out that we're going to spend the whole time at a party and there's not really going to be any combat and be a little disappointed.
You know what though? I the first Savage Worlds game I played, there was no combat, and the GM was like, "I'm sorry, there was no combat, guys." It was Bill Roper, and we were like, "No, the combat would have been awful. We're glad there was no combat. You would have ruined our game." So, I definitely feel like sometimes it is a happy surprise when you have so much fun in a game that you don't miss the other parts.
Mm-hmm.
But that really comes from, like, I say it all the time, creating your fun, right?
Yeah.
Like, if your part of the game that's fun is the role-playing, then role-play more and talk to other characters. Or if the combat part is the part that's fun for you, go figure out reasons to pick fights with people. Like, create the game that you think is fun. But I do agree with Oreztes that story game elements meld more better
More easily?
more easily into
more
traditional games than the other way around.
Quick question for you before we
Wrap up.
what type of game is Tales from the Loop?
Tales from the Loop is...
It looks story game just based on the character creation I was looking at.
It is a fairly story game sort of game. It is stat plus skill, which means you're going to have a stat. It's a dice pool system, so you're going to have a number of dice equal to your stat and your skill, depending on what you're doing. All you have to do is get a single 6 to get a success, and additional 6s get spent on extra stuff based on the action you were taking. So, like, if you're running, if you're doing, I forget what it's called, move. I think it's just called move. If you're just trying to run and you get extra 6s, one of the options is you can impress someone who saw you, right? So there's some stuff like that, right? There's weird stuff like that in the game. But for the most part, it's a very simple mechanic. It's, did you get a 6? You did the thing you said you wanted to do. Did you not get a 6? Something bad happens and I get to do some trouble to you. But it's also like the kids can't get hurt. But they can get like sad or broken, right? Like they can break their arm, but it's going to be like you take the condition injured, but like the GM can't kill the kids because that's not how those kinds of stories work. Like the kids don't die in Stranger Things. Sorry, spoilers, but
Spoilers, I haven't seen season 2. I'm just kidding.
Barb?
Obviously, you've not
I'm
seen
sorry, Barb is
Barb.
not a kid. She is an NPC.
Barb.
And Barb is older than the kids.
She's the same age as
Barely.
Nancy.
She's what's her face's best friend.
But it's like a really it's a really simple system, and I actually really like it. It's Tales from the Loop is done by Modifius. They did a really good job with that system.
Well,
That's a cool name.
I
Super
think
excited to play
we've
it.
done a really great job of talking about story game tools in traditional RPGs and vice versa. Does anybody have any final thoughts? Cool. So, Kurt, you want to tell the people where they can find us and all that bullshit?
I can totally do that. If you want
That's not
Hour and a-
bullshit.
if you want to find out more about the show, you can go to pixelscandal.com. That's where you can find our website with past episodes, links to all of our social medias and
Meteors.
podcast links and Twitch live links and YouTube links, and pretty soon you might even start seeing like blog posts about gaming and nerd culture stuff on there. So keep an eye on pixelscandal.com. If you want to contact us, there's also a contact form on pixelscandal.com, but you can also just email pixelscandal@gmail.com. We'll get that. You can follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, like our Facebook page, join our MeWe group, all sorts of shit you can do if you want to interact with us, which is that's how you do it. So go to pixelscandal.com and click on some links and stuff. We'd love to
do
talk
those
to you.
things.
Do it.
All the things.
Click them links.
Do
Share them
all
with your
those
friends. Tell
Do
your
it.
friends.
They're
Oh, and if
great.
you'd like to support the show, you can do so by subscribing to this Twitch channel. You can also you can give us bits in chat, which is a thing that some people do. That doesn't happen a lot for us, but you can also, if you buy RPG games on DriveThruRPG, you can go to our website or to our Twitch channel and click our affiliate link, and then when you buy stuff on DriveThruRPG, we'll get a little kickback from that. And sometime in the future, maybe you'll be able to give us money other ways. So
Yes.
Oreztes just subscribed. Thanks, Oreztes.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
So much.
Hey, and speaking of Oreztes' free subscription from Twitch Prime, if you have Amazon
Oh.
Prime, you can subscribe to this channel with your Twitch Prime. All you do is you go up there and you click Twitch Prime subscription, and then Handor hits himself in the face with his mic. That's what happens
was close.
every time.
I did
Happens
not.
every time.
It was close.
So if you
It was
want
close.
Handor to boop himself in the face with his microphone,
Like and subscribe.
like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Snoop.
Thanks, guys, so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you next time.
Yay.
Bye.
Yeah.